It started like any other quiet night at the dispatch center. The overnight shift was slow. A few noise complaints, a false fire alarm, and a minor traffic collision. Nothing out of the ordinary. But at exactly 3:04 a.m., something different happened. Something that still sends shivers down the spine of everyone who's ever heard the tape. The dispatcher on duty was a woman named Alicia Grant. Calm under pressure, sharp, experienced. But what she heard that night made her freeze. A call came in from a local number. Nothing unusual about that, except there was no voice on the other end. Just silence. At first. 911, what's your emergency? Alicia asked as procedure required. No answer. But then came the noise. A faint hum of static interrupted by something soft and dragging, like fabric brushing across a wooden floor. She leaned in, adjusting her headset. Can you hear me? Are you hurt? Please respond. Still nothing. She glanced at the caller ID. It was a landline. A registered address, 47 Millstone Drive. She repeated the question. And then, a breath. Faint. Hollow. As though someone was trying to inhale quietly, afraid to make a sound. Alicia's fingers hovered above the keyboard, ready to alert officers. She listened closer. More sounds followed. A soft thud. A rhythmic tapping, 3 short knocks like someone knocking from inside a closet or under the floor. And then, what sounded like whispering. But it was distorted, layered, impossible to make out. She tried again. If you're in danger, say something. Press a key, make a sound, anything. The call continued with that strange breathing. And then something unexpected happened. The static cleared for a second, just long enough for a single chilling sound to break through. A sob. Sure. Desperate. Then silence again. By now, Alicia had dispatched officers to the address. She flagged the call as a possible home invasion or domestic dispute. But the longer the call continued, the more she realized it didn't follow any known pattern. No voices shouting. No signs of a struggle. No slamming doors or background movement that would indicate a typical emergency situation. Just confusion. Disorientation. Alicia's supervisor leaned over her shoulder. Is it a child? He whispered. I don't know, she replied, her voice barely above a murmur. It doesn't sound right. The call lasted 37 seconds before abruptly ending. No goodbye. No hang-up click. Just a sudden disconnect, like the line had been yanked from the wall. When officers arrived at 47 Millstone Drive, they expected chaos, blood, signs of forced entry, a terrified caller needing help. Instead, they were met with something that left even the seasoned patrolman unnerved. The house was empty. No lights on. No movement. No signs that anyone had been there recently. The front door was locked. Windows intact. No broken glass, no muddy footprints, no disturbance of any kind. They knocked. Waited. Announced their presence. Then entered through the back door, which had been left slightly ajar, but not broken. Just open. The flashlight beams danced across dust-covered furniture and cobweb-laced corners. Every room echoed with stillness. The air was cold, unnaturally cold, despite the temperate weather outside. One officer noted that his flashlight dimmed briefly as they entered the hallway, as if something interfered with the battery. It returned to normal within seconds. The rooms were empty. Clean but aged. A worn-out recliner in the living room, covered in a white sheet. A kitchen stripped of appliances. Upstairs, a child's room with peeling wallpaper and a rocking chair that moved ever so slightly, even after they'd sealed all the windows. But no people. No pets. No signs of distress. They conducted a full sweep of the house. Basements, closets, crawl spaces. All clear. Yet every single officer reported the same thing afterward. It didn't feel empty. There was a presence. Not seen or heard, but felt. A weight in the air. A tension like the moment before a thunderstorm. Something watching. Something waiting. One officer would later describe it like this. It felt like someone had just left. Or maybe, like someone never left at all. When they returned to dispatch, Alicia asked the inevitable question. Did you find who made the call? The answer was simple. No. No one was inside. And more baffling, no phone was found. No landline. No cell phone. And records later confirmed that the house had been vacant for over 5 months. The utilities had been shut off. The phone line was disconnected. Still, the system traced the call. Not to a cell phone tower nearby. Not to a neighbor or a nearby building. It was registered, logged, and verified. The call came from inside the house. The recording was pulled. Analysts reviewed it frame by frame. Audio specialists enhanced the sound, trying to decode the whispers, the sob, the strange dragging noise. Some claimed to hear a voice. Some claimed to hear two. One investigator said she could hear someone saying, "It's in the wall." But the audio was inconclusive. Too warped. Too fragmented. The official report listed it as unresolved. A false call. Possibly a prank. Case closed. But Alicia Grant never accepted that answer. She listened to the call again and again, long after the report was filed away. She memorized the rhythm of the noises, the gasping breath, the last few seconds of rising static. And then, on the 37th second, just before the call ends, there's a moment. A half-second blip. Zoomed in and enhanced, it almost sounds like a whisper, just one word barely audible. Help. A week later, a technician from the phone company was sent to confirm the house's disconnection. What he found was even more puzzling. The phone box was untouched. No new wiring. No signs of tampering. Nothing to suggest a call could have gone out. But before he left, something caught his attention inside the house. Behind the baseboard in the living room wall, hidden under a panel of peeling wallpaper, he found something lodged in the woodwork. An old rotary phone. Dust-covered. Disconnected. The cord severed. Still cold to the touch. He reached to pick it up. And just as his fingers grazed the receiver, it rang. The ringing wasn't loud. It wasn't even sharp like most phones. It had a hollow, muffled tone, like the sound was echoing through the walls instead of the room. The technician, Brandon Lowe, froze. The phone had no power source. No cord. It was detached from everything, stuffed into the wall like someone had hidden it there decades ago. And yet it rang. Once. Twice. Then silence. Brandon stood motionless, staring at the object in his hand. The receiver was icy cold. He pressed it to his ear, more out of disbelief than curiosity. Nothing. Just static. But not just any static, there was a pattern. A faint hissing loop, almost like breathing. Then a click. The line went dead. He backed away slowly, eyes still fixed on the disconnected phone as he pulled out his cell to report the incident. But by the time authorities returned, the rotary phone was gone. Vanished. The wall was sealed. No hole, no space behind it. No sign that it had ever been removed. Brandon's report was dismissed as stress or misremembering. But his voice on the call was clear. "I swear to God, I held that phone in my hand." It rang. Built in the late 1950s, the house had changed owners many times. Most stayed less than a year. Some left in the middle of the night, abandoning belongings. Others put the house up for sale weeks after moving in. A few even broke their leases, opting to pay penalties rather than remain inside. Neighbors reported strange noises, flickering lights, and what they described as low voices that carried through the walls. But nothing was ever proven. By the time of the 911 call, the house had been empty for nearly half a year. The last tenant, a woman named Kara Melton, had left abruptly, telling her landlord that she felt like she was being watched at night. She refused to go into detail, and when reached by investigators, she declined to speak. The current owner, a property investor named Leonard Reese, claimed he'd been trying to sell the place for months but that potential buyers always walked away. Still, there was no documented incident of violence or crime in the house. No tragic deaths. No police reports. No local lore. Just a series of eerie coincidences and fleeting complaints that had piled up over the years like shadows no one wanted to investigate too deeply. The audio from the call continued to be the center of the investigation. Specialists enhanced the background sounds frame by frame. At the 12-second mark, the dragging noise was more defined. Not like fabric anymore, more like something being pulled across the floor. Wood on wood. Heavy. Scraping. At the 21-second mark, the sob. Clearer this time. A female voice, soft but unmistakably distressed. It sounded young. Maybe a teenager. And just before the call cut off, again the word help. But here's where it got stranger. Forensics confirmed the voice couldn't be matched to any known database. No missing persons in the region matched the vocal tone or speech pattern. And multiple audio technicians said it sounded layered. Like two voices trying to speak through the same throat. One desperate. The other, unbothered. A third party, an independent sound engineer hired by a local podcast investigating the case, ran the call through a custom vocal isolation filter. What he discovered turned more than a few heads. At the 30-second mark, under the breath and static, he found a low-frequency sound signature. Not a voice. A growl. Not quite animal. Not fully human either. The file was shared with law enforcement, who acknowledged it but never added it to the public case file. Too speculative, they claimed. Too subjective. Still, those who heard it in its rawest form all said the same thing. Something else was on that call. After the technician's disturbing report, police returned to the house with a new forensic team. This time they weren't looking for signs of a break-in or intruder. They were looking for anything, even the unexplainable. They brought motion sensors, infrared scanners, EMF detectors, tools typically used in arson investigations or less formally in paranormal studies. Nothing triggered the sensors. But the house was ice cold, nearly 10 degrees colder than the air outside, and colder still in the living room, near the wall where Brandon claimed to have found the rotary phone. A small handheld camera set up in the hallway captured something disturbing that night. At exactly 3:04 a.m., the same time the 911 call had been made the week prior, the motion detector light flicked on for exactly 7 seconds. The camera, in night mode, recorded a shadow moving past the door. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even a clear shape. Just a mass. Dark, unformed. Gliding instead of walking. It paused in front of the living room. Then vanished. There was one room the team hadn't thoroughly investigated the first time. A hallway closet with a bolted hatch at the base. Originally thought to be an access panel to old plumbing, it was now locked tight. When pried open, what they found was unsettling. A crawl space. Just 3 feet high and 4 feet deep. The inside was scratched. Deep, frantic gouges in the wooden walls. And etched into the floor with something sharp was one word. Listen. Inside the crawl space, tucked in the back corner, was a small object wrapped in yellowing newspaper. They unwrapped it slowly. It was a cassette tape. No label. No markings. One of the officers dusted off an old recorder found in the attic. They played it right there inside the house. The tape began with white noise. Mommy? A child's voice. Then shuffling. Crying. Then a man's voice, low and trembling. Don't talk. It hears you. Followed by banging, desperate, rapid, like someone trying to claw their way out. Then silence. Until a single whisper. Answer me. And then, laughter. Not a child's. Not a man's. Something else. As the tape ended, the temperature in the room dropped again. Every flashlight flickered. And from somewhere deeper in the house, came 3 slow knocks. Knock. Knock. When word got out about the cassette tape and the shadow captured on the surveillance camera, public interest exploded. Paranormal forums, mystery YouTube channels, and even mainstream outlets began to cover the case. Some labeled it a hoax. Others believed it was the missing piece in a far older, darker puzzle. But for local authorities, the noise only made things harder. The police department, already stretched thin and skeptical of anything outside protocol, conducted a formal investigation into the call and the house at 47 Millstone Drive. They reviewed the 911 system logs. The call was real. It came from the house's registered landline. But there was no record of the number ever being activated by the current owner. The last official use was nearly 7 years ago. The crawl space cassette tape, sent to a private lab for audio verification. The result? Authentic. No digital manipulation. No signs of editing. The voices, though difficult to trace, were real recordings, human yet untraceable. The technicians and officers involved, all were interviewed. All gave similar accounts of cold temperatures, unexplained noises, and a general feeling of dread while inside the property. But despite all this, the department concluded there was no crime, no suspect, and no further action required. They closed the file. Unofficially, many of the officers who worked the case refused to return to the house. One officer, under anonymity, admitted to waking up every night at 3:04 a.m. for weeks after visiting the site, hearing a knock at his apartment door. Each time he answered it, no one was there. The most grounded explanation came from skeptics. A sophisticated hoax. Could someone have tapped into the inactive landline? Faked the voices using old tape recordings? Planted the rotary phone for effect? It's not impossible. Audio engineers noted the tape's analog quality was consistent with recordings from the 1980s or 1990s. And vintage cassette players were easy enough to come by. Someone with time, tech skills, and a taste for the theatrical could have orchestrated a deeply unsettling experience. But that raised another question. Why? There was no viral video. No confession. No monetization. No attention-seeking figure stepping forward to claim responsibility. The incident came and went like a quiet storm, except for those who felt its chill long after it passed. Some experts pointed to a rare phenomenon known in telecommunications as a phantom call. In certain conditions, inactive or improperly disconnected landlines can, due to electrical interference or faulty circuits, bleed signals, resulting in ghost calls to 911 services. In theory, these calls might capture old audio fragments from previous conversations, overlapping recordings, or even radio crosstalk. But no known case has ever produced anything resembling the 47 Millstone call, complete with intelligible cries, unexplainable sounds, and a precise timestamp tied to physical phenomena in the house. Most phantom calls last a second or two. This one was just over 37 seconds long. And those knocks? No electrical glitch can explain that. To some, the house itself became the primary suspect. Paranormal researchers from a regional society requested access to 47 Millstone. After weeks of silence, the owner granted limited permission. What followed was a 4-night investigation. They recorded cold spots in the house that moved with time, EMF readings that spiked each night at precisely 3:04 a.m., audio anomalies during recordings, whispering in empty rooms, devices powering off unexpectedly, static distortions when investigators tried to speak. But the most disturbing finding came on the final night. One of the researchers, a woman named Dr. Eliza Byrne, went into the crawl space alone with a voice recorder. Her audio file captured her speaking calmly at first, describing the surroundings, the smell, the faint scratching she heard against the wall. Then her voice changed. She began whispering, urgently. "I hear it, it's here, right here, no I don't want to please." The last thing on the recording was a loud snap, like a mic being crushed in someone's hand. Eliza was found outside the house an hour later, barefoot, eyes glazed. She didn't speak for 2 days. When she finally did, all she said was, "There's something buried beneath it." She refused to elaborate and has since left the paranormal field entirely. Each theory, while offering pieces, failed to explain the full picture. The 911 call was real but had no logical source. The voice on the cassette didn't match any known person. The crawl space was hidden, carved by hand, and yet never documented in blueprints. The cold spots, the knocks, the voices, none of it had physical evidence, and yet dozens of people experienced them independently. So what's the truth? No one knows. The owner has since boarded up the property, refusing further access. He claims too many people have tried to break in. Some were just curious. Others said they were trying to set the spirit free. And every time someone steps on the porch, the motion light still flickers on, even when there's no one there. But then something strange happened. Just 3 weeks after the investigation ended, a new 911 call came in. Same timestamp, same address. Except this time the call was answered. And what dispatch heard on the other end sent shivers down every spine in the room. A girl's voice, crying, saying just one sentence. "It wasn't me last time. It was watching me." Then the line cut. The sudden re-emergence of the 911 call from 47 Millstone Drive sent a chill down the spine of everyone involved. The fact that it was answered, and the voice on the other end was unmistakably a young girl, shook authorities to their core. What had happened between the initial call and this second one? Was it the same girl from the first call, or someone new? And what did she mean by, "It wasn't me last time. It was watching me"? 4 days the police could make no headway. The case remained stalled and questions began to mount. It seemed as though the house had begun to reveal new layers of its mystery, but none of them made sense. After the second call, the authorities returned to the house, determined to piece together what had occurred. But this time, there were no cold spots or strange phenomena reported by the investigators. The house had a strange stillness to it, a sense of something waiting. The girl's voice from the 911 call, was it even human? The recording was played again and again. Some specialists believed it sounded like a child, while others felt it had an unnatural, almost distorted quality to it. Whatever it was not the typical response one would expect from a 911 operator. What stood out most in the recording was the urgency, the panic in the girl's voice. She was pleading for help, but then that strange sentence, "It wasn't me last time. It was watching me." Who was she talking about? Was she implying that she had been involved in the first 911 call? And if so, why hadn't she said anything before? Questions piled up faster than answers, and the deeper the investigators dug, the more impossible it became to find a solid explanation. As the days passed, new theories emerged. With every new piece of evidence, the possibilities grew. One theory that gained traction was that the house itself had a long history, one that wasn't mentioned in any official records. According to some local folklore, 47 Millstone Drive had been the site of a tragic accident many years ago. A fire had ravaged the house in the late 1940s, and 3 children were believed to have perished inside. Though no one had ever confirmed the rumors, it seemed eerie that so many of the mysterious events surrounding the 911 calls aligned with the tragic history of the house. Could the girl mentioned in her second call be the spirits of those lost in the fire, lingering on in the house? Was it possible that their restless souls had been communicating through the strange calls and disturbances? Another theory, one proposed by a local physicist, suggested the possibility of a time loop. According to this theory, 47 Millstone Drive was somehow caught in a distortion of time, and the calls were echoes from the past, reaching through the present. This could explain why the same timestamp appeared in both calls, despite the fact that years separated them. The idea was terrifying. If the house was indeed trapped in some sort of loop, the 911 calls were not happening in real time at all, they were simply repeating events from the past. But, of course, this theory had its own flaws. The physical presence of the girl in the second call was still a mystery, and why was the call answered this time, unlike the first? The most unsettling theory, however, was the possibility that someone alive, was behind the calls. Could the girl in the second 911 call have been an actual person connected to the house, perhaps someone living in the area who had never been mentioned before? Could she have known something about the first call, something the police didn't? Could the girl herself have been trapped in the house, a hidden victim who had somehow escaped the notice of everyone, only to leave this cryptic warning on the 911 line? But that theory raised even darker questions. If the girl was real, why hadn't anyone seen her? The house had been investigated multiple times, with every room checked, every corner explored. Yet, there had been no signs of life, no footprints, no belongings, not even a trace of anyone who could have made the second 911 call. Despite the growing number of theories, there were still far more questions than answers. These unanswered questions gnawed at investigators, leaving them restless in their search for the truth. Who was the girl in the second call? Had she been involved in the first call, or was she a separate entity altogether? And if she was a real person, where had she been hiding? What did she mean by, "It was watching me"? Was it a supernatural force, or could it have been a person or something else entirely? And if she was talking about someone or something that wasn't her, what was it? What was buried beneath the house? Dr. Eliza Byrne, the paranormal investigator who had spent time at the house, had said something chilling before she left the field. There's something buried beneath it. What could that mean? And if there was something buried beneath 47 Millstone Drive, what would it reveal? Why did the second call happen? What made this 911 call different from the first? Was there a connection to the house's tragic past, or was it something more sinister? And perhaps the most terrifying question of all, will there be a third call? If the house was truly haunted, if it truly held secrets, what would happen when the next call came in? Could the haunting grow stronger? And if there was more to uncover, would anyone be able to handle the truth? The investigation seemed to be at a standstill, with more questions than answers, and every theory only adding to the growing sense of dread. But just as the police prepared to wrap up their investigation, something happened. Something that would change everything. Just when it seemed that the investigation into the haunting calls would reach its conclusion, something far more unsettling happened. It came in the form of a package, delivered to the police station and signed and unmarked. Inside there was only one item, an old, weathered tape recorder. The package's arrival came at a time when the case seemed like it would be shelved indefinitely. After all, the leads had all but dried up. No one had been able to explain the eerie calls, the ghostly theories surrounding the house, or the disturbing second 911 call. The authorities were ready to move on, but the strange package changed everything. Detective John Heller, who had been at the forefront of the investigation, was the one to listen to the tape first. He didn't expect anything of substance to come from it. After all, what could a tape recorder possibly reveal that hadn't already been investigated? But the moment he pressed play, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The sound was unmistakable. It was a third 911 call. The voice on the recording was different from the first two, older, more distorted. It was as if the girl from the previous calls had been replaced, but her words were still just as chilling. "I'm here. It knows I'm here." The voice sounded tired, strained, as if it had been trapped in the house for far too long. Then came the chilling pause, the one that had terrified the investigators the most. There was a soft, whispering sound in the background, a murmur that couldn't quite be made out. As the recording continued, the voice spoke again, but this time it was filled with a terrifying desperation. "It's watching me. It's waiting for you." The words were broken and complete. The static on the line was almost deafening, but there was no mistaking the desperation in the voice. Whoever was speaking, they were trapped in the house, unable to escape. And it wasn't just the girl from the 911 calls. It seemed there was something else in the house. Something watching. The recording was taken to the lab for further analysis, but the sound was heavily distorted, making it difficult to extract any clear details. One thing was certain. The voice on the tape was not from a typical 911 call, and the words were deeply unsettling. Detective Heller sat in his office, replaying the recording in his mind. Could this be the girl from before? Had she somehow recorded a message for help? And why was the voice so distorted this time? Was she in a place so remote, so isolated, that it could be causing the phone lines to warp and bend in this strange way? But there was one thing that stood out above all else. It's waiting for you. Who was the it the girl was talking about? And why would she say it was waiting for someone as if it knew they would come? Was it some sort of trap? Or was she trying to warn them about something far worse than they had imagined? The arrival of the tape recorder and its eerie message brought the investigation back to life, this time with an even greater urgency. But it also sparked a new round of theories, each one more unsettling than the last. One possibility, discussed among the investigators, was that the girl in the 911 calls wasn't alone. Perhaps she wasn't a victim at all, but an accessory to something far darker. Could it be that there were multiple people involved in these mysterious events, working together to create the chilling 911 calls? In this theory, the girl might have been part of a larger plot, and the watching she referred to was not a spirit, but someone, or something, who had been waiting for someone to fall into their trap. The question was, who were these people and why had they been using the house as their staging ground? Another theory that began to surface was that the house was the problem. The more investigators dug into the history of 47 Millstone Drive, the more they realized that the eerie occurrences and the 911 calls might not just be a coincidence. What if the house was alive? What if the house itself had somehow become possessed by a malevolent force, one that fed on fear? Could the presence of something watching be the house itself? Was the house trying to communicate, and was it somehow using these disturbing 911 calls to warn or manipulate those around it? But there were no clear answers. The house was still as quiet as ever. No new physical evidence had been discovered. And the girl's 911 calls continued to baffle the police. As the investigation deepened, the most haunting thought began to surface among those involved. Could this be the calm before the storm? The third call, though chilling, was only one part of something much larger, something waiting in the shadows. Detective Heller couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the edge of something terrifying, something that might soon reveal itself in a way none of them could expect. But just as the investigation was about to take a new turn, something happened. Something that would change everything. The police received a final 911 call from the house. The same voice, the girl, was on the line once again. But this time her words weren't cryptic. This time she spoke clearly. You should have never come here. And then, the line went dead. The final 911 call, the one that left the words, you should have never come here, hanging in the air like an ominous warning, was the last piece of the puzzle that would never quite fit. After that call, the silence of 47 Millstone Drive returned once again. There were no more strange packages, no more mysterious phone calls, and no more sightings of the girl who had haunted the minds of everyone involved in the case. The house was empty. The phone lines went quiet. For Detective John Heller and the rest of the investigation team, it was a relief of sorts. But it didn't feel like a resolution. If anything, it felt like something far worse had been uncovered. The truth was there, hidden beneath the surface, but it was incomplete, just like the chilling 911 calls that had started it all. Weeks passed, but the case remained unresolved, leaving the police and the community in a constant state of unease. The unanswered questions that lingered, who was the girl? What did the house want? Remained as chilling as ever. Some locals refused to go near the house, convinced that it was haunted, cursed, or perhaps even something worse. The rumors about the tragic history of 47 Millstone Drive only gained more traction, with people talking in hushed tones about the fire that had burned through the house decades ago and the spirits that might still be trapped there. As for the authorities, they were left with nothing but their theories, the haunting 911 recordings, and the feeling that something had been left behind, something they couldn't explain. And so, the case of the unanswered 911 calls was closed. But for those who had followed the investigation, it remained a mystery that would never quite fade away. The questions were endless, the possibilities unsettling. What happened to the girl? Was she a victim or a participant? Was there really something supernatural at work, or was it all an elaborate hoax? Could the house itself be the key to unlocking the mystery, or had the authorities simply failed to understand the true nature of what was happening? One thing was certain. 47 Millstone Drive would never be the same. The haunting calls, the eerie messages, and the unsettling silence had left their mark on everyone involved. For the people who had dared to investigate, the question still haunted their thoughts. Had they really uncovered everything, or had they just scratched the surface of something far darker? As we reach the end of this unsettling journey, I want to thank you all for watching and following along. The mystery of the unanswered 911 call may not have a clear answer, but it serves as a reminder that not all questions have solutions, and not all mysteries can be solved. Thank you for joining me through this haunting journey. If you enjoyed this story and want to dive deeper into more chilling mysteries, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on our next investigation. Share your thoughts, your theories, and your questions in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think happened at 47 Millstone Drive. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, sometimes silence is the loudest answer of all. Subscribe and never miss a chilling story.